In the previous lessons, we discussed the importance of believing in oneself and the abilities that God has given. Today, with God's help, we will reflect on motivation. Without motivation, a person, regardless of his abilities, will not activate all the talents and tools that God has given him to use, both spiritually and materially. The word motivation is quite new, but in Hebrew, in the language of the Bible, words like desire, will, and enthusiasm are used. There is a verse in the book of Kings about King Solomon. And Solomon built Gezer, the city of Gezer, and found it in excavations, and the lower Beth Horon, and a list of names, and the cities of chariots and cities of horsemen, and the desire of Solomon, which he desired to build in Jerusalem and Lebanon, and in all the land of his kingdom. What is the meaning of these words? It should have been written, and all that he wanted to build in Jerusalem, all that he built. Why does it add, and the desire of Solomon, which he desired to build in Jerusalem and Lebanon? To tell us that the reason King Solomon succeeded was because he had a desire, a motivation, a will. All that he desired and wanted, he accomplished. This teaches us that while we are not King Solomon, God has given each of us wisdom, skills, abilities, and strength. But we need the desire, the will, to make them work. Even spiritual progress depends a lot on a person's motivation. Even material and financial progress does. A person who wants to succeed needs to activate himself and come to a proper understanding of how far he can go. One way is to allow his heart to desire a particular goal. Sometimes the intellect understands, but the heart leads the person elsewhere. Sometimes it's not because the person didn't think, but because others diminished him, criticized him, and pointed out how he couldn't. This happens often in childhood and can accompany him throughout life. He forgets that he has grown up and has abilities. The words he heard in his youth, those hurtful words, or even in a relationship, can limit him to the point where even when he is capable, he believes that he is not. There is a story about a group of tourists who visited Africa. They saw a giant African elephant that had the ability to carry logs and move heavy objects. But to their surprise, it was tied to a small peg stuck in the ground. Obviously, if it pulled a little, it could break free, but it remained there in submission. They asked the elephant's owner how he wasn't afraid the elephant would escape, given its strength. He smiled and replied, "When this elephant was born, it was a small calf. It didn't have much strength, and I tied it with a small rope and peg. In the first few days, it struggled, but it couldn't break free. After a week or two of trying, it realized it couldn't. It still believes it can't. It doesn't even try anymore, forgetting the size and strength it has now." Every person needs to ask themselves, am I stuck in the way I was told I couldn't do it? Did I believe in myself? Life moves forward. I have progressed. I have risen. The king says, let us read the verse here in the book of Proverbs chapter 12. The thoughts of the righteous are justice. The schemes of the wicked are deceit. King Solomon says to a person, do you want to succeed in life? Think according to justice. The thoughts of the righteous, what does it mean to be righteous? A righteous person is one who walks according to justice, according to truth. He has the right perspective on life. His thoughts are like judgment, just like a judge sitting on the seat of judgment. He cannot be lenient. You send a person to prison, and in ancient times they could even execute him. You can free a criminal who could harm others, but someone sitting in the seat of judgment cannot cover things up. You have to hear all the testimonies, get the complete picture, and investigate all the details. Once the picture is complete and no detail escapes your attention, you can make a decision. King Solomon says, do you want to succeed in life? Go with justice and make decisions like a judge. Every action you take, look at it with a very holistic view, making sure no detail is left out. Suddenly, you will discover that you are capable of much more. Let's take a simple example. A person who wants to earn money. He opens a business and wants to progress in life. What does he tell himself? What motivates him to work, to act, to develop, to advance? I want money. I want a livelihood. I want to get rich. That's nice, but look at it from a more comprehensive perspective. Think about the implications. Not just, I want money so I can have a house, but I want money so I can help many people. There are people in need who have no food at home, and I want God to bless me with such abundance that I can help many families. I live in a neighborhood where they haven't built a synagogue, and I want to help build one there. Now, he will work hard, he will strive. When a person introduces an ideology into his material goals, it gives him motivation. If it's only about making ends meet, he will exert only enough effort to get by. But with a higher perspective, he realizes, I am capable, I can do this. Let me think outside the box and come up with new ideas. How can I develop things? When spirituality enters material pursuits, it gives a person life. It breathes energy into him, and he may suddenly realize that he has powers he didn't know about. He starts thinking differently, thinking deeper. While others have finished thinking, he is just beginning and taking several steps ahead. This is true in every field. Let's imagine a person who manufactures screws. He has a factory, and he also manufactures beds and other metal products, including screws for the Iron Dome. When he wakes up in the morning, he can say to himself, what am I going to do today? I'm going to produce screws all day. Or he could say, what am I going to do today? I'm going to be part of the production of a system that will protect the people of Israel. Why limit yourself to thinking small? Look at it from a spiritual and higher perspective. A more extreme example, a person works in cleaning hospitals and washes restrooms. The work may seem degrading, and that's how he feels. But if in the morning he says to himself, my job is to be an assistant to the doctor in sterilizing. Without clean restrooms, people will get sick and die. What am I going to do? I'm going to clean, I'm going to disinfect. I'm a life-saving doctor in my own way. A woman changing her child's diaper might think, this annoying child is just bothering me today. Instead of reading a book, I have to change diapers. But she could also say to herself, right now, I'm doing a kindness for a helpless baby who has no one else to help him in life. Only I can save him. I can help him. He's not just my son, he's my responsibility. If not me, then who? When I bring both the spiritual and the practical together, I know I'm not just helping, I'm saving lives. Yes, this is my son. I feed him, care for him, and raise him with kindness. But when I approach it with a higher spiritual perspective, the very act itself is elevated to a higher level. And it's important to remember that the reward a person receives in the world to come is even greater. The Mishnah Berurah raises an interesting question in Biur Halaha. What about a person who writes tefillin, mezuzot, and Torah scrolls and sells them for a living? Is he considered someone engaged in a mitzvah, or is he simply working to earn money? On one hand, he is dealing with sacred objects, but on the other, he is selling them. So, which is it? Is he considered someone who is engaged in a mitzvah, or is he simply working for money? The answer is profound. It depends on his mindset. If he thinks, I'm just doing this for the money, I don't really care if people have tefillin or mezuzot, I just happen to make my living by writing them, then he is not considered engaged in a mitzvah. But if he tells himself, I am helping people fulfill a sacred commandment, I am making it possible for a synagogue to have a Torah scroll, for a home to have a mezuzah, for another Jew to wear tefillin, then his work is elevated. Yes, he still needs to make a living, but his intention transforms his work into something greater, and his reward will reflect that. You are doing an act of kindness. When we moved to Beitar, there were only a few streets. Today, thank God, it is a large city. one of the major contractors who built many streets there. I met and talked to him about what he was doing. I asked him, "Why are you building?" He replied, "This is my business, my livelihood. I am a construction contractor. I build." I told him, "Put into your mind that you are building homes in the land of Israel. You are fulfilling the mitzvah of settling the land of Israel. This upgrades your act to a different level. It's not just about making money." I explained to him the biur halaha. This is what it says about tefillin and mezuzah. You are building entire streets. Did you see how these hills looked before? It was all barren, and now look at what a beautiful city you've built. Add a spiritual thought to your actions, and it will upgrade both the act and your reward. This is also a huge motivator. You are doing something spiritual, aiming for higher things, and it gives the act a completely different meaning. King Solomon says, "The thoughts of the righteous are justice." When you think about something, think according to justice. Justice includes all the details. You don't just focus on one point, like a judge cannot focus on one point and ignore the rest. On the other hand, the schemes of the wicked are deceit. With the wicked, King Solomon doesn't say, "The thoughts of the wicked are deceit," but immediately jumps to schemes, because with the wicked, they never think straight. They always start thinking, how can I deceive people? How can I trick them? How can I manipulate things? Everything for them is about scheming. They don't walk in honesty, while the righteous person's thought is pure. The thoughts of the righteous are justice, a comprehensive picture, but with the wicked it is always about tricking people. Where can I deceive them? They don't realize that over time, even if they succeed in deceiving others, tricking people in business, their success will diminish, not only from a spiritual perspective, where they won't have divine assistance, but also from a natural one. A person who lives through deceit and trickery, earning money in such a way, is always in fear. His thoughts become narrow, limited. Instead of seeing the bigger picture, he is constantly in survival mode. How can I escape without getting caught? What if I get exposed? What kind of life does a person like this lead? King Solomon said in another place, "Better a dry piece of bread and peace there than a house full of sacrifices with strife. Better dry bread and peace than a house full of meat, but full of arguments, tension, and stress." Many times people seek legal advice about a case, whether with a partner or regarding inheritance, and they're sure they're right. The other party is also sure they are right. The question is whether to enter a legal battle or to settle for a compromise and finish the matter, even if it means losing some money. One of the major considerations before entering a legal battle is mental health. Initially, the thought is about money. They took advantage of me, they stole from me. If I win, I'll get more. But think also about your mental health. Do you really want to enter a legal battle that will likely drag on for years? The stress of not knowing what will happen, especially if it's a family matter, because once the courts get involved, it never ends. Better to take less, even if you feel you deserve more. Make a compromise and continue to be a family. Love up to 120 and avoid getting into inheritance battles and anger. Remember this verse from Solomon. Good advice? He says, "Better a dry piece of bread and peace in it than a house full of sacrifices with strife." Even dry bread, but you have peace of mind. That's everything. Once, Rabbi Zamir Cohen, the head of the yeshiva, may his memory be a blessing, told a story. Before the founding of the state, he remembered that when they started issuing identity cards, those born after the founding of the state or those who had documents from before the state's founding were issued identity cards based on their information. But for those born before and without any documents, they were asked what year they were born, and their identity card was issued based on what they said. There were no records or evidence, only what they themselves knew. He mentioned that there was an elderly man in the Bukharim neighborhood near Beit Yisrael who was walking around very troubled. He asked every acquaintance, every friend, anyone he met, "What do you think? Should I add a few years? I know when I was born. If I add a few years and register as older, I can get benefits from Social Security and other things. If I register a few years earlier, I might lose other things." He asked people, and they tried to explain what he could gain. Eventually, he went to a wise scholar and asked, "What should I do?" The scholar answered, "Why not just register the true date?" The old man responded, "I never thought of that. I was thinking about before or after, but why not write the truth? Why get involved in all these schemes? Walk with honesty." Thoughts of the righteous are justice. What happens when a person feels they've lost motivation because of a mistake they made? They worked for years, saved a lot of money, invested in something, and then discovered it was a big mistake. All the money they saved through years of effort is lost. Sometimes it's in stocks, sometimes in a business they opened without enough thought. After realizing their mistake, they feel a loss of motivation. "I'm nothing." Their self-esteem drops, and they feel foolish or unsuccessful. What's the point of working again if I'm just going to make another mistake? I already made one. Who knows if I'll make another? And then they shrink and get smaller. There are people in relationships too who had a failed first marriage and then don't want to marry again. "I failed. I couldn't make it work. What's the point of trying again?" This is a big mistake. First of all, a person must understand that naturally you learn from your mistakes. What mistake did I make? I will learn how not to make that mistake again. If I ended up in a divorce in my first marriage, it's not just that she was wrong or he was wrong, but probably there were things I should have done differently. Instead of standing on ego and arguing, there are things I see that the other side won't change, so I need to adapt. Why stand on my own when, in the end, there's a bigger loss in doing so, even if I'm sure I'm right? But you can see that for your wife, it's very important. Decide, I give up on this. In the book on relationships, we gave some advice for situations where there is tension between spouses. And one of the things people who tried it said helped them a lot. When there is tension between a husband and wife, and you see that you've been arguing for 3-5 years and not getting along, sit down with your wife like grown-up partners. Sit down and each of you write on a piece of paper 3 things that bother you most about the other person and that you want the other person to change. There are details, but those are like the leaves of a tree. Every story that happened is like a leaf. You can't deal with the leaves. Forget about the leaves. There are roots, and the roots are what grow all the tension, all the anger. So the man writes 3 things to his wife. He says, if my wife changes in these 3 things, if I really see a shift in her, a change for the better, even if it's not perfect, but there's a significant change, then I can accept the rest and I will manage with the rest. But these 3 things I can't tolerate. If they don't change, I can't continue living with her. And she writes 3 things she wants him to change. The rest are like the leaves of the tree. Forget about them. But these roots are important to her. She wants a change in them. And when each person gives their list to the other, they agree in advance not to argue about whether it's right or wrong. Arguing about that could just lead to a bigger argument. Don't argue. Your wife chose these 3 things that she wants you to change. You tell yourself, I'm going to take these 3 as my project. I will work on changing them, even if I think she's exaggerating, even if I think she's wrong. She chose them, and I'm going to start working on them. The same goes for her regarding you. If my husband chose these 3, it means they are the most critical for him, and sometimes there are surprises. There was a time when I would tell stories of testimonies of strange cases where the wife was shocked. This bothered you all the time? Or was it him towards her? But you see, he chose this from all the details. Invest in this, put in the effort. He will see the change, and he will become a calmer person. The same works for the other side. Both sides can reach peace at home. But even someone who has reached the point of divorce needs to say to themselves, there was a failure the first time. Don't fall into despair. In the second time, be more cautious. Investigate more thoroughly to see if the person has good qualities, fear of God, and the necessary traits. What I'm looking for, maybe I was hasty the first time. And it's important to emphasize the word hasty. I'm not referring to those who drag the relationship for 2 or 3 years. Those people don't really see the truth of the other side. Why? Because they don't keep physical boundaries, so they don't really see the truth. If you want to see the truth, it's enough to have a few meetings with physical boundaries, 4 to 5 meetings with physical boundaries, and serious discussions to get to know the person. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your background. In each meeting, get into more details. What are your aspirations going forward? When there are physical boundaries, people can eat together, go out, talk, but not touch. Physical contact is a bribe. A bribe blinds the eyes of the wise. So you can't say after 2 or 3 years, I will get to know her better because you made a mistake the first time. That's a mistake. 4 or 5 meetings. If it fits, set the wedding date. If not, part ways. No need for more than that. When you reach the conclusion that you want to marry, and she has reached the conclusion that he's right for her, that's it. No more than 3 months. Until the wedding, it's 3 months of arrangements, preparation, studying the halachot, laws, family purity, how to respect each side, and having advisors, which is common in yeshiva communities. From the time you decide to get married until the wedding, there are about 10 meetings with a Torah marriage counselor who is knowledgeable in both halachic matters and peace in the home. There is also a guide for brides and a guide for grooms. Don't think, what can this rabbi teach me? I'll teach him how to behave with a wife, because when he sits in the lessons, he will discover many surprises, many new insights. 10 meetings are highly recommended. These are spread out over these 3 months, and generally, 4 or 5 meetings with physical boundaries can tell you whether she's right for you or not. After 5 meetings, if you still feel it's not working, it's not clear, and it's not connecting, you can schedule more meetings, but everything should be with physical boundaries in sanctity. If there's no compatibility, no connection, part ways. If it works, get married. This also prevents delays and the problems of reaching later ages when people are still unmarried. What happens when a person fails financially and it causes them to lose their self-confidence? They think to themselves, I made such a mistake. It was such a foolish mistake. Or today, I don't understand myself. How didn't I see this? It was so obvious, especially when others warned me. Don't do this, and still. I did it because I thought I was so smart. So, aside from learning from mistakes, is there anything else to consider? There is a verse. He turns wise men backward and makes their knowledge foolish. There are situations where Hashem, God, causes wise people to turn back. He takes away their wisdom and confuses their judgment. When Hashem wants something to happen for the good of the person, let's say, God forbid, a decree on a person to go through a car accident and lose a hand. Why? Because of sins from a previous reincarnation or from this one. Accounting for God's ways, there's a decree on him. Hashem, in his mercy, says, instead of him losing his hand, I want him to lose $100,000. What does Hashem do? This person is wise, intelligent, and won't make mistakes. So he confuses his mind. He says, invest in this stock. And Hashem knows in advance that he will lose. But Hashem closes his mind at that moment, causing him to make the mistake. Why should you say you're foolish and have no chance? The decree was annulled because of the mistake you made, and that was from heaven. Everything is for the good. Everything is in the hands of Hashem, and He does everything for the best. So, Continue working diligently with confidence and belief. I failed once, but now I'll succeed. I will move forward until I eventually reach perfection. There was a woman who once called. She was an older woman, probably around 70, from the way she sounded on the phone. She said she wasn't ready to go into surgery until she had a conversation. She had fallen down the stairs at her house that day, from top to bottom, and her leg was in bad shape. They needed to take her into surgery to treat her leg, and they told her they couldn't promise she'd be able to walk on her leg again. It could be that she would never walk again. What was troubling her? She said that this morning she received a request from a charity organization she always donates to. She knew the organization well, and she mentioned its name. It's an organization that does good things for the Jewish people, providing food for children and families in need. She said, "I always donate generously." This time they reached out, saying they were opening a new branch, and asked if she could donate more. She had opened a large savings account and was debating with herself whether to donate or not. "I have enough, thank God, and I won't need that money. It will probably go to my children as an inheritance, but I won't use it." On the other hand, donating such a sum was not easy. It's money. She didn't say the amount, but it was a large sum. After much deliberation, she told the secretary she would make a transfer for this amount, all the money she had in her savings. She said, "I almost dropped the phone because of what I heard. I couldn't believe it. This is a donation." She blessed her, and she started to feel better. She says, "I made the transfer, and a few hours later, I fell down the stairs and broke my leg." She says, "I started thinking, maybe because of this donation I broke my leg. I don't understand. I can't go into surgery until I get an answer. How could it be that on the day I did such a great mitzvah, this happens to me?" I share the story that the sages tell about Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and Elijah the prophet. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi lived at the end of the Tanaitic period and the beginning of the Amoraic period. He is mentioned once in the Mishnah and more frequently in the Gemara. The sages speak highly of him, about his holiness and strength. He would meet with Elijah the prophet, talk with him, and learn from him. During one of their meetings, he said to him, "I want to accompany you. I know the Holy One, blessed be He, sends you, Elijah the prophet, on various missions. I want to come with you and learn the ways of the Holy One in the world." Elijah said to him, "You can accompany me, but I don't have permission to explain things to you. You will see strange things sometimes, but you will have to try to understand. If you ask me, I will answer. But after that, we will have to part ways. You won't be able to come with me anymore." Rabbi Yehoshua agreed. "Fine, I'll try to understand." There is a long story about what he saw and how he tried to make sense of it. There was one event he couldn't hold back from asking about. He asked Elijah, "Explain to me how you did this." Elijah said, "We are going to test a couple on whether they will uphold the mitzvah of hospitality. They will both disguise themselves as poor people in the middle of the night." They knocked on the door, waking up the entire house. The children awoke, and the husband and wife, young, poor, and struggling, had only one skinny cow in their yard. They made a living from the milk of this cow, and the entire family survived off it. Their house was a small, dilapidated hut. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi didn't ask why, but he tried to understand. Perhaps the Holy One, blessed be He, sent Elijah to test them with the mitzvah of hospitality. If they fulfill the mitzvah, He will probably reward them with a diamond on the table or a check to make them rich. The husband and wife opened the door and saw two poor people. "We have nowhere to stay. May we stay with you?" they asked. The wife asked them, "Did you eat dinner?" They were a kind-hearted couple. Elijah said to her, "No, we didn't eat." They barely had anything to eat, But they couldn't let people go to sleep hungry. They invited them in, gave them food, and let them sleep in their own beds. They slept on blankets on the floor. The hospitality was extraordinary, and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi was happy in his heart. If they had known this was Elijah the prophet, they would have danced with joy. He was sure that they would reward them. After the house quieted down and everyone fell asleep, Elijah the prophet woke Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and said, "We're done, let's go." They opened the door quietly and left. No diamonds or checks appeared. Worse still, on the way out, Elijah killed the couple's cow. Rabbi Yehoshua couldn't hold back anymore, and he said, "I don't understand. I thought you were testing them to reward them, not destroy their livelihood. How did you do this?" Elijah said, "I will explain, and then we will part ways. But I cannot bear this. Before anyone is born into the world, it is decreed how long they will live. Some are destined to live 80 years, some 70, some 100, some 20, and some only 8. There are actions a person can perform to extend their life, to gain more years. This allows them to gain more Torah, more mitzvot, and more good deeds. The longer they live, the more reward they get, even if their time was up. As the verse says, charity saves from death. Even when the time for death has come, a person can extend their life with charity. This couple," Elijah continued, "as you saw, they are kind-hearted. They help everyone, even when they have nothing themselves. I was sent from heaven to test them with the mitzvah of hospitality." And why was I sent to them? They don't know that they are such a happy couple, full of love, raising children. The wife is young. But before she came into the world, it was decreed that she would die tonight. The husband would wake up in the morning to find his wife gone, because her time had come. The cow would be an atonement for his wife. In other words, the cow would die in place of his wife, and his wife would live longer, and that's what I did. They accepted us graciously. So yes, he will wake up in the morning, look up, and say, "Master of the world, is this what I deserve? I did the mitzvah of hospitality. Why? Why did my cow die tonight? Where is my livelihood?" But the Creator has other ways to provide for him. However, he will gain his wife back after 120 years, when he comes to the world to come, and he will see that the cow was for his wife, and he will know that the Holy One, blessed be He, took the cow from him. So I told that elderly woman, "I am not in heaven, and Elijah the prophet did not appear to me to tell you what the Creator's calculations are with you. But you know that a woman of your age, who fell down all those stairs you described, could have ended up in a completely different situation. Who knows if it wasn't just your leg that broke, and heaven forbid something else, because of the charity you gave in the morning? But think, a truly faithful woman, would you really believe that? Because you gave charity, you broke your leg?" She said to me, "I understand it didn't happen that way, but thoughts arise. When a person reflects correctly, they know there are calculations of the Creator. Not everything depends on them. Sometimes He who answers the wise will turn them back, and then a person must bow their head before the Holy One. Blessed be He, accept things with humility, and continue with life's joy, energy, motivation, and desire, as it is written about King Solomon." Let's read again the verse about King Solomon's desire to build in Jerusalem. The verse says, "You know why he succeeded in building? Because he had desire, and that desire led him and brought him to great places." Is there another piece of advice? The Mesilat Yesharim, path of the just, brings another perspective. Up until now, we've talked about the intellectual aspect, how a person approaches life with energy, motivation, desire, and aspirations. If we take the example of President Donald Trump, how many people predicted his failure? After he lost the first time, many were sure it was over for him. There were no legal cases yet, and it was possible he could even end up in jail. All those who wished for his downfall might have been happy to see him crash. But what made him become President of the United States again? his motivation, his belief in himself, his belief that he could succeed. He believed in the righteousness of his path. When they asked him why he thought God saved him from the shooting, his answer was, God wanted me to save the world. In other words, he understood that he had a mission in life to save the world, not just to be president, to gain more money or power. He saw it as an ideal. He saw his purpose in saving the world. By the way, from Trump's story, there is also a great moral lesson about guarding one's eyes. The Kabbalists say that a person who is tempted to look at something inappropriate, to watch an inappropriate movie in the street, to look at something they shouldn't, or to go to a mixed beach and overcomes that temptation, the reward he receives in heaven is unimaginable. Joseph the righteous kept his holiness despite the temptation from Potiphar's wife. It is written that she was the most beautiful woman in Egypt. Joseph knew that if he looked at her, he could fall. He knew how rare her beauty was, and she tried everything to seduce him while they were alone in the house. He told her, I will not look. She threatened him, saying she would make him blind if he didn't look. He responded, Hashem opens the eyes of the blind. She said she would imprison him, and he answered, Hashem is the one who frees prisoners. In the end, she threw him in jail, just as she had threatened, but Joseph did not give in. Because of this, he merited greatness. He achieved fame, and his name remained forever attached to the title Joseph the Righteous. Joseph earned the title of Tzaddik, righteous, because he stood firm in his test. There is a verse about the Tzaddik Yesod Olam. The righteous is the foundation of the world. The covenant is connected to the 10th Sephirot, with Yesod corresponding to the foundation. The righteous who preserves his holiness in such a trial receives an immense reward. Keeping one's eyes holy is a great thing. In the case of Donald Trump, something interesting happened. A sniper shot at him, and the bullet was supposed to hit his brain. But instead, it only grazed his ear. Why? Because he turned his head for just a second. He looked away from the bullet, which missed his brain and passed by his ear. A person who sees something inappropriate and avoids looking can save their life. You never know what reward you will receive for avoiding looking at something you shouldn't. This is a message from Hashem, conveyed through the story of the American president. Now, when a person feels emotionally drained, their intellect may tell them all the right things, but their heart doesn't respond. They don't feel the inner drive or motivation to do what they should. The Ramchal, in chapter 7 of Mesilat Yesharim, explains that just as zeal, zrizut, is born from inner enthusiasm, so too the outward movement can ignite inner passion. When a person moves quickly in action, their inner desire will follow. If a person feels a lack of motivation, they can say, I will get up, I will go, I will do it. Even if they don't feel inspired inside, they should still act, because through their actions, their inner desire will develop. The Ramchal teaches that the essential thing in serving Hashem is the heart's desire and the soul's yearning to fulfill a commandment. Just like the verse says, as the deer longs for streams of water, so my soul longs for you, O God. He brings additional verses and then says, however, the person who does not have this longing and desire in him, as David felt, who thirsted and yearned, is not in the same state. A good advice is not to hurry in your desire to the point where the longing will naturally arise. When you move outwardly, the inward part will also awaken. External actions stir the inner feelings, and it is certainly more under your control, the external actions, than the internal ones. It is not all dependent on you. You can try to awaken it, but the external actions are under your control. You decide, I will get up, I will go, I will do. And then you will see that the inner passion begins to stir and act. The last part we will finish with the situation of criticism. A person who feels that his motivation has decreased because of criticism, because others have put him down, giving him words that diminished his self-worth. Here, he needs to instill within himself belief and confidence. We have already touched on this before. Let's say briefly, a person needs to tell themselves, if Hashem believes in me, that I can do it, then certainly I need to believe in myself. The Rebbe of Kotsk said, just as a person needs to believe in God, so too must they believe in themselves. Believe in God, who created the world, and believe in yourself, who has been given strength and abilities. And when they tell you that you are not capable, say, these are their words. Tell yourself, if God created me as a lion, I will not let anyone turn me into an ant. God has given me strength and power. Sometimes, especially in work, people try to put you down out of jealousy. There are people who are envious, who have an evil eye, and try to show you how you are not capable or how you are not successful. Sometimes it's even the boss, not just someone competing with you for a position. Sometimes the manager has a more successful lineage than you. So, how will he show you that he is more successful? Through criticism and comments. A person should filter out these things, saying to themselves as King David did, when my enemies rise up against me, my ears will listen. King David says, even when they want to harm me, I listen to what they say. Maybe there's something in their words that I need to improve, something I need to fix. So if in the criticism I receive there is something correct, I will change. And this will help me build myself. Maimonides writes, I am happier with someone who points out my mistakes than someone who proves that I was right. Why? Because the one who points out my mistake teaches me that I need to correct it. It's nice to hear compliments, but they don't build me. This is the perspective of a great person. Yes, the other side, who offers criticism, should not speak in a hurtful, humiliating, or degrading way. They should speak constructively what needs to be fixed. But even if the other person spoke in an offensive manner, a person should not take the insult to heart. Rather, only the message. If I have something to fix, I will listen. However, these criticisms should not diminish a person's self-worth, destroy their drive, will, or belief in themselves. We will conclude with a blessing for the entire audience here, for all those watching, that these Torah words should lead to success for all, for the protection of the people of Israel and the soldiers of Israel everywhere they are, that they all return to their homes healthy and whole.